to the Shades of Entrepreneurship, where we interview entrepreneurs to inspire the future entrepreneur. I'll be your host, Mr. Gabriel Flores. So grab a drink, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Shades of Entrepreneurship. This is your host, Mr. Gabriel Flores. Today, I'm here with Izzy from Portless. Izzy, how are we doing?
Doing great. Thank you so much for having me. Very excited to be here.
Yes, I'm excited. I was actually talking to Izzy just briefly before we got on to the show here. We're talking about cash flow just this morning. In fact, almost every conversation times kind of revolves around cash flow, especially if you want to have a successful business. But before we get into all that, Izzy, go ahead and introduce yourself. Who is Izzy?
My name is Izzy Rosenzweig. I'm the CEO and founder of Portless. Just 30 seconds on Portless. Portless takes a different approach to supply chain, where traditionally brands that are in the e-commerce business would manufacture, let's say, 10,000 t-shirts. You would put on a boat, you'd wait 2 months. Finally, you get it. In today's world, you pay import duties day one. That's a lot of money up front. Then you get your goods and you're shipping across the United States over the next 4 to 6 months, let's say. Portless has a different approach. We have facilities in China and Vietnam. You can send your goods to us in those facilities. We'll get it 1 day later. Then you can start selling it to your customers. We'll have it picked, packed, delivered in 6 to 7 days to the customer's front door. 100% local experience, USPS, local carrier. So consumer has the same experience as they had yesterday, but brands, cash flow, massively improved cash flow. Instead of 2 months of lead time, taking massive inventory risk, take less inventory risk, get your cash out really quickly. And that's high level on myself and what we do.
Nice. Now let's take a step back. Give us some background of like how you got to this point in creating this brand.
Absolutely. I probably did it the way many entrepreneurs do, which is you have to live the pain to want to solve it. So I was a brand owner and I started my brand business in 2012. I was an e-commerce business. And in those days, I had a certain amount of money for inventory. I was buying goods from China, Vietnam, and India. And I buy the goods. And like I mentioned, I put on a boat. And I'm waiting. And during that time, I have no money to, pay employees and pay bills and pay rent, etc. But you scrape by and you finally get the goods. Then you're slowly starting to sell it. And during the sales times, because you have to make these inventory projections months in advance, you're usually wrong about inventory projections. So I would have excess inventory, but I always made enough money to reinvest. So the first 2 years I did it, it was extremely painful. But first year, I think we did 80,000 of business. The next year we did 130,000 of business, but never had cash in the bank, always on water or trying to sell it. Then I got very fortunate. I met some of my early advisors, which are ex-Alibaba executives. They helped us introduce this idea of a evolving space of direct supply chain. So instead of putting on a boat, keep the goods near the factory and deliver right to the end customer. When we did that, the business scaled like crazy. The first year we went to 2.5 million, and we basically grew 100% over the next 4 or 5 years. Went from 2.5 to 5 million to 11 million, 22 million, 45 million. And the main reason why we were scaling is because we had no cash flow problems. We removed the chains and the burdens of cash flow, and we were getting cash of inventory so quickly. So that was game changing for us. We ended up shifting in 2022. Apple released a privacy update, which really ruined marketing attribution. So if you were spending money on Meta, you couldn't see which ads were working. So the consumer business was getting, got difficult for us. So we ended up pivoting to a B2B model where now we support other American brands to leverage this model. So now Portless is just a B2B business. We unlock this massive cash flow efficiency for hundreds of American brands to leverage this model and be more cash flow efficient.
So take us through that process. So for those that might be, unfamiliar with overseas products and purchasing a large, MOQ from overseas, take us through that process. What does it look like?
Yep. So again, that brand will let's just say is in the t-shirt business. They go with the factory. They say, hey, they first look at their internal data like, oh man, we need enough inventory to last 6 months. Why? Because there's 2 months of water, summer season's coming. We got to make sure we have enough for summer season. We don't want to mess up. So let's just say, we'll keep it simple. Summer season, t-shirts and swim shorts. Okay, we're going to do 3 colors. We don't know what color would be the best. We'll do, black, white, blue, let's just say, for both the t-shirt and the swim shorts. But we want enough inventory to hit our revenue projections, but not too much inventory that we have excess. How do you make that prediction? Very hard. So you're making that order early January, just so you have sales for June. You make that order, 10,000 units of every single color. Now you have 60,000 units total, 10 of each, 30,000 in shorts and 3,000 t-shirts. You just laid a lot of money. Now you're waiting 2 months till you get it. Finally, you get it. You get it 2 weeks just before summer season starts. Then you start doing sales. What happens was, you didn't know, but now there's a massive trend for black shorts and black t-shirts. And no one is wearing white this summer. Just went out of trend. Well, it sucks, because what happens is you get sold out of the black t-shirt and black shorts. You have no inventory. You sold out 2 weeks in, and you have a lot of excess inventory of the white one, and you did okay on the blue one. That is a really hard way to run a business. Versus what you could have done is, hey, let's do 2,000 of each color. Now let's test demand. And you could do it not in January, you could do it in March, because your goods will be done production, but let's say 2-3 weeks later, it's in your facility by early April. You just save 3 months of cash flow, not have to lay it out. And now you have 2,000 of each unit. Now you're selling. Now you're saying, 1 second, black is spiking. Factory, double down the black ASAP. 12,000 units, 5,000 units. You get 5,000 units, 2 weeks later, it's in the thingy, you're constantly selling, and you're constantly doubling down. So you're not out of stock. Now, being out of stock is the largest loss of revenue you'll never see in a P&L, because people want to be sold out, but you're not going to see out of stock, you're losing that revenue to competitor. So now in this model, not only do you have less money in inventory, not only are you avoiding excess inventory, you're doubling down on the right colors and the right SKUs. That is game changing from reducing losses and increasing sales, besides for also adding cash flow. So that's kind of like a summer example for a business.
Yeah, no, that's a great example. In fact, I think it's very pertinent in the current environment, especially with the costs of tariffs from foreign countries. And in fact, I recently found out that one of our local companies here in Oregon actually stopped selling goods in the United States completely and just started focusing on Europe and Poland and different areas. And so that also is a huge hit to our local economy, right?
Massive hit.
And so with that, what kind of strategies and what advice would you give entrepreneurs that are really getting hit hard with these tariffs, and what should they be doing? What should they be thinking about?
Great question. So the first thing we say is, it's such a fluid situation. It's almost impossible to make any big decisions until there's proper direction. Because you might say, hey, let's move to Vietnam. Well, Vietnam's not so simple. Vietnam has limitations on their fabric mills. You want to buy a fabric, you have to buy 400 rolls. You want to buy 10 rolls, you got to buy from China. The ecosystem of embroidery, it's good, it's not great. It's not as good as China. You might have to wait till it's your turn. So there's a lot of other complexities that other countries, that exist in other countries. I'm not saying it's impossible. You just can't switch on overnight. Yeah. It's a very big risk if you make that switch and you fail, you're out of business. So we say is educate yourself. Find out, maybe get a sample here, get a sample from India, start educating yourself, then optimize in place. For example, great scenario that you said, and we're hearing that too from our brands. It's a crazy thing to say it's easier to do business in Europe than it is in the United States. Who would ever think we'd say those words? But it is. It's easier with tariffs, easier with trades. They are focusing dollars in Europe. Also, what they're doing is they're using Portless for tax deferment. To your point, we had a brand about to put $1 million on a boat. If they would put $1 million on a boat, 2 months later, enters the port, they need to write a check for $1.4 million. That would bankrupt them. That is insane. So in the Portless model, keep it near your factory. Don't pay import duties. Only pay import duties when you're doing parcel by parcel. Only in that case, you already collect the money from the customer. Then you ship the parcel. Sure, you pay 100 orders a day or 200 orders a day. You already collect the money from the customer. You can afford to pay it, at least from a cash flow perspective. HS code audit. Look at your HS codes. Are they accurate? Getting the wrong HS code could be the difference between a base tariff of 5% to 30%.
Yep.
Obviously, reciprocal, you can't fight that, but at least your base you can work with. There is something called tariff engineering. There's a big shoe company, Converse shoes. They put more than 50% felt on the base of their shoe. Why? Not because they need it for comfort, because over 50% self, legally, it's a slipper. And if it's a slipper, it's a fraction of the tariffs, closer to 5% than it is over 20%. So there are things you could do. Fundamentally, we say, again, educate, optimize in place. And the best entrepreneurs that look at every part of their supply chain and try to survive until there's a deal will be the ones that survive and then gain market share.
Man, that is the most unique strategy that Converse is doing with the slipper. That's remarkable. Brilliant. Yeah, brilliant. Absolutely freaking brilliant. I mean, at the end of the day, there's that old saying when there's blood on the street, buy real estate kind of thing, and you just have to, and essentially you just have to create different ways and even in your innovation, your product designs and operational, you have to always create innovative ways to continue to move forward. Because unfortunately, this is not going to be the last trade war the United States goes through.
Yep.
And we don't currently have an end date for this one, right? And so it might continue on. Now, with that said, the next kind of question too is the actual relationships. What advice do you give, entrepreneurs, especially within, I would say, the product industries, right? Whether it's a clothing line or toys, whatever it is. What is the best way for them to build relationships and maintain relationships with suppliers overseas throughout this turmoil time?
A great question. What's really brutal about all this is that everyone loses in a trade war. So, the factories that we know our brands work with, and we know a lot of them as well because we help brands with introductions, they're amazing people and they're amazing operators. But everyone's being upfront. Everyone's like, guys, there's only so much we could do here. At some point, we're going to have to look. What is interesting is we are seeing some Chinese operators open up factories in Bangladesh, in Vietnam, in other parts of the world, because in general, they are the best operators. They've just been doing this the longest and they know what needs to happen to get the job done. So you might want to speak to your factory like, hey, do you guys plan to open up any other countries? Can we buy from that country? Because nothing wrong with a Chinese owned Vietnamese factory. It just has to be made in Vietnam. So definitely speak to them there. Try to negotiate. Again, there's only so much you're going to get, but back when tariffs were 20%, we've seen factories give 5% discounts, 7% discounts, like trying to share the burden. But I mean, at this point, 144% is not going to do much of a dent. But do what you can. Again, you got to look at all the pennies and all the quarters too, and be open with your factory. Maybe they could have better payment terms, so you could delay. You just kind of have to look at everything, but be upfront, and the factories understand it. And everyone wants this to end. Nobody wins.
Yep, yeah, completely agree. And one thing. I was actually having a conversation last night with one of my buddies who happens to be in the finance world of a large corporation here. And one of the things I was asking him is their relationships with their, overseas partners. And if they were able to negotiate deals where the suppliers were able to kind of offset some of the tariff costs, right? With that, like you mentioned, the 5% discount. He's like, I'm pretty sure we are, but I'm going to tell you. So another thing too is, even if you do, those are your own personal relationships that you've built yourself. That's a huge value. If you choose to share that information, by all means, you choose to share it. But you got to understand that, to Izzy's point, you're really they're trusting you. They want it to end as well, but you just don't want to erode that trust by falsely saying, oh yeah, hey, I'm working with this, and they're going to give you a 5%, because that's not always going to be true. They may have done it with you because you've been with them for years, and so just be mindful about how you approach it. I would highly recommend understanding their values. Right? Is it not only as an organization, but also as a community, as a culture, understand how to bring up these topics in a business situation, because it's not always, Americans are what we do in the state might not always be applicable around the world, and cultural norms sometimes differ. So just make sure you do that. Now, one of the things you said, Izzy, was, the education piece. Talk about how Portless in particular helps educate their clients. And then more importantly, who was the kind of typical target for Portless?
Yep, great question. So first we'll talk about how we help brands. So we have operations in China. We also have operations in Vietnam, and we're opening up operations in India. So for any brand that needs help, we make free introductions to factories. Like our mission is this, we want them to be successful with their factories so we can do logistics for them. So everything from QC to factory introductions to sending them samples, we're here to support them in any way we can, beyond the actual helping them with this, with our model that also helps with cash flow and tax efficiency. So as much introductions as possible in any way we can on the supply chain side of the business. Regards to the customers that are ISP for us, anyone that manufactures in China or Vietnam, that is lighter goods. So think like apparel, cosmetics, shoes. We're not good for the furniture business. We're not good for anything bulky or large. But if you're on the lighter side, think like apparel, shoes, cosmetics, accessories, we could be a very, very interesting solution. Our shipping rates start at $5, starts light, but obviously as it goes up, it gets heavier, it gets more expensive. But definitely, educate yourself in other models like our model, educate yourself in other countries. Are there factories in Vietnam that can support you? And if you're one of our clients, we could also help with those introductions.
Yeah, and I suspect, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that the reason you're kind of mentioning those individuals with the smaller, because you're not using the shipping ports. You're in fact flying. Now, can you talk a little bit about the cost difference between shipping ports and air?
So the landed cost to the end customer is actually quite similar if you're on the lighter end. So I'll explain why. So sure, by shipping container, the cost of container, cost per pound or cost per kg is cheaper. But then it gets to your facility, then you're shipping it zone 1 through zone 8. So if you're in New Jersey, you got to ship it to San Diego. That's cross country. That takes a long time and it costs more money. In our model, using air cargo, and we're injecting it to 6 places across the US: LA, Chicago, New York, Arizona, Texas, Miami, which means we're always zone 1, zone 2. So we have cheaper last mile. Now there's the air cargo component. In that case, the example I give is, well, let's pretend you're in the jewelry business. How many pairs of earrings can fit in a pallet? Literally hundreds of thousands. So your cost per order is quite low. Now, obviously, scale it up to a t-shirt, scale up to a dress, scale up to a pair of shoes. But as long as you're on the lighter end, where you're sharing the pallet with many, many other orders, and it's not on the way to one facility to be shipped, so 1 through 8, that flight is halfway to the customer's front door, zone 1, zone 2. So as long as you're on the lighter end, we leverage air cargo, and that is how we give you the fast delivery times plus a cost-effective rates.
Perfect. Now tell us some of the cautionary tales. Like, so if entrepreneurs, if they're doing this specific thing today, stop. What are some of those cautionary tales specifically within the shipping receiving world? What should they either start doing, one, and what should they stop doing?
Great question. I would say in a world where we're in tariffs and every single dollar matters, the world of free shipping, I think you might want to test that. I'm not going to say a hard stop, but in a world where tariffs are rising, you have to raise prices. Now there's a hard choice because you're also doing marketing. And if you raise your physical good, let's say your t-shirt from $20.99 to $30.99, well, that might be a barrier that a customer doesn't want to see to add to their cart. But what if you added $4.99 to the t-shirt and charged a $4.99 for standard shipping, and then you do free shipping above a very high AOV? So I do think in the world of tariffs, you're going to have to raise your prices, even if you're cost effective and cost the entire supply chain. I would very carefully balance where you do it. And we've seen a lot of success where brands would charge in shipping where historically they didn't. It's another way of slicing the cat, but from a customer checkout experience, it could be, they expect many brands to pay something for shipping. And that might be a nice way to collect some money and, regain some of your margin without totally destroying add to cart rates.
Now, I got it. Again, this is very, very, very interesting. I really love the concept, and I think we'll talk a little bit after the show. I think I have somebody for you that really could probably use some of your assistance. But more importantly, I would love to understand how you actually scaled this business to this point. Because again, folks, we're talking with 6 to 8 days of reaching up to your client's door. 55 countries they're able to support. And as he mentioned, he's China, Vietnam, and India, right? And so how did you and your team, how did you scale it to this point?
It took us 10 years. So I started this for my brand, right? So when I was building my brand back, we started shifting to a direct supply chain model in 2014. And we built to start off very slow. And it took a long time. It took us 2 years to create legal entities in China, local directors, KYCs, bank accounts. Then we had to understand the air cargo business because there's air cargo. Not every product could go on every plane. Battery has a certain type of plane. Cosmetics, is there alcohol in it? Certain type of plane. So there's a world that we had to learn, but we learned it simply the long, hard way. And as we scaled our own business and our own brand, we were scaling our infrastructure and operations efficiencies, build software towards it, build localization towards it. And because we did all that work, we already built scale under our own business. And then we shifted to the B2B model, and we leveraged all the learnings to support other businesses. So there was no short way. It was simply long, hard, and painful, lots of mistakes, and constantly optimizing and getting better at it. So it took a long time, and we're fortunate we're there.
What would, in your opinion, what would you say are like some of the products that entrepreneurs should probably stay away from trying to sell and ship? What are those areas, like you kind of mentioned the shoes and being able to put the 30% and make it like a slipper? What are the exact opposite areas you should just completely avoid?
It's an interesting question because, and I think I'll answer it in a way that I see some of our brands do. There are lines. If you look at if a brand looks at their catalog, they're going to have high margin, very profitable lines, and ones that are like, they're good for get cheap CAC, cheap customer acquisition cost, but you're very tight on margins. I would highly encourage to simplify your SKU assortment, narrow it down to the most profitable side of your SKU assortment. Sometimes it is better to have 40 best-selling SKUs than 2.5 or 300 wide variety. While it might look good for the website, and you might think you're doing your customers a favor, but you're actually doing yourself a disservice, because every SKU takes focus. Every SKU, you have to have an investment. And if you don't have the margins there and they're simply not driving the profit, you add tariffs to that, it will go from a low margin business to a negative margin business. So we say highly encourage you, be very focused on the SKUs that work, the line items that are successful for you, and just double down on that until things settle.
Yeah. And let me give you guys a great example, a real life example. So folks that are listening, you guys know, please follow us at theshadesofE.com. Go and subscribe. You'll have all this information. But some of you guys may know Swag for My Brand, right? A brand I started a couple of years right before this new election. Now, the concept was working with swag.com, and we would, work with their team. We were able to, my specific focus was trying to target corporate organizations, because one thing people don't know is actually corporate organizations have a $50 write-off per employee on an annual basis, that they can actually write off $50 per employee for an employee gift. So I was like, hey, if I target you, I will sell you, 10,000 employees, $50 times 10,000, right?
Yep.
Except I'm going to sell you swag with your brand on it. So you can give it to your employees. And now I'm also highlighting the benefits, like the ROI of the brand of swag, right? Most swag items last like 2 years. You still have those company t-shirts, right? And so the longevity of it, right? What happened though is the tariffs started to come in. Now, again, I'm working with swag.com. So there's a percentage already being removed from that margin. And then once the tariffs hit, it didn't make sense. Sure, I can continue to make money. I could have made money, yes. But the amount of money that I was going to make versus the work, the return on investment wasn't there for me. If I'm getting less than a 20-30% margin, it's probably not I'm wasting my time. In fact, if you look at the Colgates of the world, the large conglomerations, who is it? I can't remember. Procter & Gamble. They do not take anything less than like an 88% margin. 88%. Like their toothpaste, that toothpaste you buy from Colgate, it's probably like 20 cents to make it, and they charge you $5. You know what I mean? And so if you can certainly make money. I'm not saying you cannot. I'm just trying to encourage you to be mindful of, is the juice worth the squeeze? Okay.
100%.
So now with that said, what juice is worth the squeeze? What should folks, what are those low-hanging fruits and verticals that entrepreneurs should probably actually explore?
Yeah. So for us, I'm less informed on people wanting to start new businesses, but I would say what we're seeing brands do is either A, shift focus to other countries. right? And we help support 55 countries. And UK is an incredible market. Australia is an incredible market. Canada, New Zealand, even Western countries in Europe, great e-commerce markets, well established, well built. So either do that, lean into existing products but in different markets, or really just doubling down on winners. So I don't know what brands are doing by building new assortments. Every single product is being hit on reciprocal tariffs. It's not like there's a strategy around reciprocal, but leaning into winners or leaning those products into other countries.
Yeah, and I think you're starting to see it more and more as well. Those countries that are, those brands that are starting to look at diversifying and it's not necessarily because that was part of their strategic plan, and maybe it was, but now it's being accelerated based off of the environment. So again, everything's kind of reciprocal, right? If one thing happens, another thing happens. It's all domino effects, and so we just kind of go with the flow. Now, with that said, where do you envision? Where are you trying to take Portless in the next 5? Where does Izzy see himself in the next 5 years?
100%. For us, we see ourselves in the very early stages of a massive shift of the way supply chain is done for e-commerce. And the example I give is the last time there was a major shift is actually closer to the 80s when shipping containers became commercialized. Prior to that shift, most manufacturing was local. My grandfather had a factory in Toronto, and my dad ran it for many years after that. But it was expensive. You bought a dress, you spent hundreds of dollars per dress. People bought it once or twice a year. But then when shipping containers got commercialized, you can now produce goods near the raw materials at the most cost-effective rate in the world. And then all of a sudden consumers want, because they're paying a fraction of the cost, great quality, and brands are still making their margin. That shift changed business over the course of 20 years. Now, the local factories are niche areas, and those still exist. Majority follows value for the end consumer. Where is that? So while the manufacturer is the most cost-efficient place, the other side of that equation is horrible cash flow. So you're getting the good brand and low prices, but cash flow sucks because you have the boat. Now, boat was built for physical retail. Physical retail, if you go to Walmart and pull something off the shelf, the most effective way is to bring it by boat. But if you're in the e-commerce world, boat doesn't make any sense. Still find the most cost-effective place in the world to manufacture. Your consumer needs to win. But now you can also do what we call the direct supply chain model. And that will be a total fundamental shift in the way supply chain is done for e-commerce, giving consumers the great value of their product while allowing brands to still maintain a healthy cash flow business, be profitable, and scale the business globally. So we're in the early innings. We're in China. We're in Vietnam. We're opening in India. But the vision is to have it in every single major manufacturing hub. There'll be a Portless to service the brands in those countries.
I love it. Now, if there's somebody listening that wants to, they want to schedule a time with you, what are some of the things that they should be thinking about before they approach your team? Where should they be at relatively within their business to kind of connect with you?
Great question. For us, we'd say if you're doing less than $1,000 a month, you're a little early. We encourage you to get to $1,000 a month because if you over optimize on supply chain before you figure out distribution, your focus is in the right area. Like get your distribution, figure out you're doing your sales. Once you're $1,000 orders a month, feel free to reach out to us on portless.com. You can book a call right on the website. You could follow me on LinkedIn. I'm constantly posting content. Send me a DM there. But definitely, A, if you're manufacturing China, Vietnam, B, you're in the lighter bucket of goods, clothing, shoes, accessories, cosmetics, and you're doing some version of sales, let's say $1,000 a month, then you could be a good fit for Portless.
Perfect. And again, folks, check out the shadesofE.com. We will have Izzy's information as well as information for Portless, because that was going to be my next question. Izzy, if people are interested in learning more about Portless, maybe connecting with you, how do they do it? You mentioned LinkedIn. What about the websites? Is there other ways they can connect with you?
Absolutely. Portless.com. We have a ton of content there. We have blogs, we have case studies, we have multiple podcasts. You can learn more about what we do. And then, of course, feel free to reach out and reach out to your team on the Contact Us page, and we'll get back to you right away. See if we could connect and see if it would be a good fit.
You heard it here, folks. Portless.com. Again, these folks can save you about 40% margin improvement, about 66% reduction in risk, and about 3x better cash flow with a 10x faster lead time. So again, the service and product is really unique. Again, focusing on those smaller products, right? So this is not for the cars and the boats and the things of that nature, although by all means, if you guys still reach out to Izzy, I'm sure he might be able to find you somebody. But again, leverage those relationships, leverage these contacts, make sure you build them. Again, we'll have Izzy's information on the Shades of E, so make sure you hit that subscribe button. Izzy, before we go, are there any last words?
We just say for us right now, we're in a very, let's call it fluid time. My encouragement to everyone that we're talking to is just survive this negotiation stage and optimize and reserve cash and be efficient in every place you can. Because if you do, you're going to be at one up and edge on your competitors, and hopefully in the long run, give you more market share.
Man, I love it. Optimize during this negotiation phase. That's what we're going to call it now, the negotiation phase. I love it. Again, folks, please follow us at theshadesofE.com. You can also subscribe at YouTube. This video will actually be available for Patreon members a week early. So go ahead and hit that Patreon. And then you can also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. You can also connect with me, Mr. Gabriel Flores, on LinkedIn. Thank you and have a great night.
Thank you for tuning in to the Shades of Entrepreneurship. For more information, please follow the Shades of E on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or visit theshadesofE.com.